is the 77 WABC minicast. Breaking news.
And if you're just joining us here on the Rita Cosby Show, major police activity 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house, and an update from law enforcement on the scene is expected at any moment. A number of law enforcement officials are deeming it as a major development in the case of Nancy Guthrie. And let's pray it is good news that breaks this case wide open. There are reports that 2 individuals have been taken into custody, and some people are saying it may be a mother and son. It's in an area of Catalina Foothills, which is about 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house, about 5 minutes away by drive if you go. And it's a fairly nice residential area. So let's see where this is going, but this could be a very, very big night. And of course, we're going to have developments probably at any moment in this case. President Trump watching this case, the world watching this case. And let's pray that maybe something has broken wide open. Meantime, President Trump also keeping an eye on Iran. We are seeing that the USS Gerald Ford, which is the biggest carrier group there in the U.S. military, it is now en route to the Middle East. So what does that mean? Does that mean that maybe the time for talking with Iran is over? President Trump, of course, always wants to keep Iran on notice. Remember last time he said, I'm going to give him a chance. I'm going to give him a chance. I keep extending it. They didn't come to the table. And then we saw that he took that hit on those multiple nuclear facilities in Iran. Boy, did that send a message. And now President Trump is giving them another chance, saying, are you going to shape up? Are you going to get rid of your nuclear development? Are you going to stop killing protesters on the streets there in Iran? Well, here just a little bit ago was President Trump talking about Iranian negotiations, still saying, I am waiting for them to come to the table or else.
How confident are you that our negotiations with Iran will be successful?
I think they'll be successful, and if they're not, it's going to be a bad day for Iran. Very bad.
Wow, I would not mess with President Trump when he says it's going to be a very bad day for Iran. You know he means business. And here's a little bit more because, of course, reporters were curious. What does that mean? Could there be some military action against Iran? Maybe even this weekend. Listen to this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack?
Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they wanted to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action. They've already started. Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, and other carriers going out shortly. So we'll see it how if we could get it settled for once and for all, that'd be good.
Listen, I give him credit. He continues to say he wants to negotiate. He continues to extend the deadline. You can't say he hasn't given Iran a chance, but this is also a very pivotal moment when you see what is happening, that there are protests in the street. There's a moment here, and President Trump recognizes that as well. So let's see what happens. Boy, a busy night. Also, in the middle of all this, in Munich is the Munich Security Conference, and it's sort of, all different political sides go there. AOC went there, you guys, and Governor Gavin Newsom. And I find this so distasteful. He goes overseas. He did this during the Davos, a meeting that took place over there in Switzerland, and he was bashing Trump. So here he is. He's one of the speakers over there. They have everybody speaking over there, all sides. Marco Rubio is also going to be speaking over there. And Gavin Newsom goes over there and he starts again bashing Trump. He's got Trump derangement syndrome.
Donald Trump is doubling down on stupid. Never in the history of the United States of America has there been a more destructive president than the current occupant in the White House in Washington, D.C. It is code red in terms of American leadership in this space. Low carbon, green growth. I hope, if there's nothing else I can communicate today, Donald Trump is temporary. He'll be gone in 3 years. California is a stable and reliable partner in this space. And it's important for folks to understand the temporary nature of this current administration in relationship to the issue of climate change and climate policy. But the biggest problem is the deceit and the denial that's happening because of these special interests. And so you just have to have the courage to call it out. And so all of us have a role to play. All of us have agency. We can shape this conversation, but we have to stand up with more clarity, conviction, and we have to be more consistent. I mean, I'm under assault attack by this guy every single day. Here's the President of the United States. He's 80 years old, and he's calling me a nickname that an 8-year-old called me, new scum. The President of the United States. You saw the racist tropes he put out. This is the President of the United States of America. Call this guy out.
And it's not like Newsom hasn't made horrible statements against President Trump. And speaking of sort of the twist of Twilight Zone, if you will, this was the classic today. I heard from Tim Walz. You heard him speaking out saying they will pay. He's referring to ICE. Like what? He's going to try to launch some lawsuit against ICE for taking criminals off the streets in Minneapolis, saying they created chaos as opposed to thanking federal law enforcement for getting rapists, murderers, and pedophiles off the streets. There's no thank you from Minneapolis whatsoever. And then remember, Tom Homan came over there, and then they've diminished the number of ICE. Now they have essentially ended the operation short term there, at least, saying they could come back at any time, but saying we're moving out. And they don't get any thanks whatsoever for it. All they do is get bashing from Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. It really is shocking. So today, Jacob Frey gets on CNN and he says he agrees with Tim Walz essentially that there needs to be some compensation to Minneapolis for, quote, the damage that he says ICE did to their cities. You have got to be kidding me. This truly is the Twilight Zone. Listen to this one.
Governor Walz was talking about that as well, and he said he wants federal compensation because of what happened in Minnesota. Right. He said you don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it. Do you agree with that there should be federal compensation?
I do. To give you an idea of the damage that we have collectively experienced, this has indeed been catastrophic. Now, to be clear, we're not victims here. We are tough. We've got the kind of grit in Minneapolis that I think is admirable. We're going to make an extraordinary comeback. And of course, we have to acknowledge the impact on people, on children, on small and local businesses, on our economy.
Like the damage? Wait a minute. So crime doesn't dissuade people from coming to the cities. Having people run amok and creating barricades and blocking ICE. And also these protests that were completely getting out of hand that they seem to allow at every twist and turn. And I say inspire and facilitate, in my belief, at every twist and turn. That doesn't dissuade people from coming? You got to be kidding me. But yet he wants recompense from ICE? I mean, how does that make any sense? But speaking of Twilight Zone, and we just played that clip from CNN with Jacob Frey, here is Caitlin Collins on CNN, who also made an interesting Twilight Zone comment, saying essentially CNN is never biased against Trump, essentially. Listen to this doozy.
You know, they always argue the media is biased against them and doesn't cover them fairly, even though we cover them, I think, fairly and accurately. You wanted the focus to be on the subject matter and not on you personally as a reporter. And so I always try to, keep that distance in terms of that. And I think keeping your composure and that point is important because you never want to prove them right on that front, that they are right, that you're biased against them or that you have a personal, angst here. I don't.
She doesn't. I guess she thinks everybody just walks in there from the Jim Acosta School of Journalism. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. And you're listening to the Rita Cosby Show on a very busy news night. By the way, we're just getting word also in the Nancy Guthrie case that it was a warrant that was apparently served at that home that was 2 miles away from the Nancy Guthrie house. So that's a very big deal. If it was a warrant, they had to have a judge sign off on the warrant. They had to have information that was pointing to a location and to grant a search of those premises. And apparently at least one person has been taken into custody, at least in detention for questioning. So that's very interesting. Something was pointing to that house. Again, just 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house, not too far from where that single glove was found a few days ago. This would be maybe a big break in this case. And we're going to have details at any moment, hopefully, on that. Robert from Philadelphia, line 5. Robert, your thoughts tonight.
Hi, Rita. I didn't want to get too much off topic, but I'm hearing about, Gavin talk about Trump, and I'm looking at this list of accomplishments that Trump has done in just 1 year, and it looks like a good resume for any 4-year president.
Hey, Robert, you got some clicking on your phone. Will you do me a favor? Will you call right back, and we'll take you, but will you call right back? You got a little bit of clicking on your phone. In the meantime, let's go to Pamela on line 4. Pamela, your thoughts tonight.
Good evening. You never know where a clue is going to come from in a case like this. When people start giving up hope, like with the Elizabeth Smart case, her younger sister, was smart enough and had the acuity to recognize the abductor's odor from a worker who worked around the house. That is amazing. After 14 months.
Yes, and gave a very good description too, if I recall too as well. Remember, gave a a bit of a description too, that kind of tied it all. You're right. That was so unexpected. And of course, in the Elizabeth Smart case, she was abducted from her home. And, it was such a weird, bizarre case. Ended up, of course, that she had been, abducted for some time. But then I'll never forget when that story broke. I mean, that was an extraordinary moment when that happened. I mean, she was 14. Remember? And it happened, Salt Lake City. And then she was discovered, if I recall, in Sandy, Utah, and I think it was about maybe half hour or so away from her home. And I believe it was 8 or 9 months. I mean, 8 or 9 months. What an unbelievable. And it was, what was it? Wanda Barzee, remember? And Mitchell. I'm trying to remember. It was Brian Mitchell, if I recall.
Yeah, he had her as his wife, and people, somebody bumped into him and said it didn't look right. There was another person involved, but the sister identified him through the odor. So you never know when miracles can happen, where something out of the blue can connect somebody.
Yeah, bravo. Great points. And let's pray that maybe something has evolved tonight. All that surveillance footage came out. It very well could be connecting. Somebody could say, hey, I know that person. The other thing that this just broke a little bit ago, obviously they identified the backpack and it was exclusively sold at Walmart. So that's actually a good sign because they could go through Walmarts in the area. Also, there are a number of news organizations that were saying, I think the sweater that individual had on also looked like a brand that was from Walmart. So if that's the case, somebody may have bought both of those items at Walmart, and then you could narrow it in who bought those 2 items. Probably not a lot of people bought those 2 items in Walmart. So hopefully maybe all these things have produced an enormous bust, maybe DNA. We know that a glove from inside, or rather outside, and then also DNA in the house, some other type of DNA, non-familial. All these things, you could put them together and that could provide an enormous bust. But Pamela, I'm getting a sense they've got something significant. Your thoughts, because they wouldn't on a Friday night say, hang tight, we're going to have an update shortly for you. And then they're teasing that it is a major development in the case. So you would assume it's something fairly significant that they're having media stand by. Here we are close to midnight Eastern time. So, this looks like it could be something significant. Let's hope, right, Pamela?
If it's a mother and son thing, one of the theories that I was thinking about too, amongst all of them, was this is like a weird, bizarre case, like the Elizabeth Smart case, where somebody is holding her and maybe infatuated with the stardom of Savannah, and it's the only way they can get close, like a weird, fanatical thing.
Right. You never know. You're right. It may just be, something as bizarre as that. And it also may be, who knows, if it's a mother and son taken into custody, or if maybe they were talking to the mother and son and they end up taking the son or the mother, who knows? But if, you never know if they were talking to both. Maybe the mother was not aware and the son was tied to it. Sometimes, a lot of times you don't know. We don't know how old, if it is a son. And again, there's just multiple reports of that. But if there are a son, it might be not a son who's like a 12-year-old son. It might be like their 30-year-old son or 40-year-old son. You just don't know. But I think we're going to know some answers soon. And I find it interesting. It's exactly where, in that, at least in that similar area where the glove fell out. So that's, and I didn't think it was a coincidence that they found that glove, because they suddenly, let's not forget the developments too, Pamela. They suddenly showed up and started combing that area of Catalina foothills. And then they discover a glove. It wasn't like they just were checking everywhere and they found a glove. Something drove them to, and I'm talking about from a tip wise, sent them to the Catalina foothills. They find the glove, and then now they're making, it looks like, at least some sort of detention. They served a warrant on a house in the Catalina foothills. So you would imagine this could be something enormous. Pamela, thank you very much. And let's pray, just like you said. Sometimes it's an unusual tip. It's an unusual thing that leads them to that. Maybe all of these things combined, but there's an enormous amount of police presence now in this area. Again, just 2 miles from the Nancy Guthrie house. And you have to believe that they seem to think they have something significant, that indeed, they are sending so many assets to this area. So let's see, you guys, stick with us. It's going to be an action-packed night here. And in the meantime, support our heroes.
The Rita Cosby Show presents Support Our Heroes. And everybody, this is the Tunnel to Towers Foundation Support Our Heroes segment with a very powerful story from Little Rock, Arkansas, where one man got the opportunity to celebrate his monumental centennial birthday with a big neighborhood bash. World War II veteran Joe Chervak turned 100 years old, and family, friends, and neighbors, and many in the public there turned out to honor him, waving flags and celebrating his incredible life. Chervak, who proudly calls himself part of the greatest generation, served in the U.S. Navy in the Pacific Theater from 1943 to 1945. He enlisted at 17, leaving high school to join the war effort at the height of World War II, and also served as a radio man in the U.S. Navy in that Pacific Theater. Bravo to him, and of course all of our great members of the greatest generation and their families. And everybody, help America to never, ever forget. All you have to do to make a huge difference in their lives is donate just $11 a month to the incredible Tunnel to Towers Foundation. They do so much for our great heroes and their families. They are the best. Be sure to check them out at T2T.org. T2T.org. And we're going to take your calls when we come back. 1-800-848-9222.